having just blithely said that you don't actually need to know how to read a weaving draft, there are some instances in which you do. And in this case, it is only a threading draft. Now, if I can just mask that off. So the reason you would need to know how to read something like this would be if you were weaving a color and weave technique piece. Now, I don't have a color printer, so all my little threading drafts here are in basically shades of grey and shades of dark, but that's fine because it's only a 2-color sequence. If you look at the single line of drafts, just that single line, what the single line is it shows you the sequence in which you would thread your slots for this particular color sequence. So if you're using the direct warping method, as you know, you have 2 threads in each slot. Our slots are always threaded with pairs of threads. If you have just a single line of draft, as we have here, you should know immediately that this is your threading draft for your slots. And if we look at what I've got here, you can see that each block is equivalent of 1 slot. So each block contains 2 threads. My first 5 slots in my threading would be of a neutral color. After that, I thread alternatively 1 slot with a dark color and 1 slot with a light color, 1 slot dark, 1 slot light, and so on and so on. Now, just to point out to you that we do always read our threading drafts from right to left, and we read our threading drafts from right to left as opposed to left to right, which would kind of make more sense, but we read them from right to left because that is the direction in which we thread our looms. So don't get confused about that. The next part of the draft that you need to understand is this one. So now you can see, instead of just having 1 line of blocks, I have 2 lines of blocks. On the right-hand side here, you have a designation for an H and an S. Obviously, H stands for hole, S stands for slot. So, where there is a filled block in the bottom row of blocks of this draft, that will mean that you have a thread in a slot. Where there is a filled block in the top row of blocks, that will mean that you have a thread in a hole. So what has happened here is we've taken our first pair of threads from that first slot in our initial threading draft. We've taken those 2 threads, we've separated them out into a thread in a slot. We've taken the left-hand thread out and we've threaded it into the hole which corresponds to that same slot. So what this double-lined draft is it's basically separated everything out now into slots and holes. So don't worry about the blocks that are not filled at all. Those don't matter. They actually count for nothing. All they do is they separate everything out so that it's easy to read. So here there's my first pair of threads, there's my second, third, fourth. So, oops, I've left one pair out here. Don't let that worry you. But that's my border, the threading for my border here. Now, the next one, this is a dark block. So we had 2 dark threads in this particular slot. And again, we've separated that pair of threads out to leave 1 behind in the slot, and the left-hand one, I'm getting my rights and my lefts mixed up here, the left-hand one has been taken out of the slot and transferred to the hole to the left of that slot. The next block is light, and there are my 2 light threads, 1 in a slot, 1 in a hole. then we go dark again, one in a slot, one in a hole. So that's a fairly simple depiction of a color and weave draft. This first line, just to recap, the single line is as we would thread our slots when we were doing our direct warping. The two lines gives you an indication of how the threads are distributed between slot and hole. And the reason that we do need this two-line draft is because our distribution of our threads between slots and holes is not always uniform. So if you have a look, for example, let's go to this one. If you have a look at this draft here, you can see that my threading draft for my slots is identical to the first example, but my threading of my slots and holes is different. So here, that pair of dark threads, one has been left behind to stay in the slot, and the other one has been transferred to the next slot. It hasn't gone into the hole. Our light block here has been separated out, and both of the light threads have been taken out of the slot and they've been redistributed into the holes corresponding to the two dark threads. So your color threading drafts for your slots and holes, you can see this one is different again, that one is also different. This particular little threading draft that I'm working on here is the basis for a color and weave study that we're about to start on the Patreon page. So if you'd like to know more about this incredibly fascinating technique, pop along to my Patreon page and have a look. If you'd like to subscribe, that would be absolutely fantastic. We're going to weave this as a sample, going through the different threading possibilities, and then we're going to expand on it a little bit, and then in a couple of months' time there will be a color and weave specific project which will take all of the knowledge that we're doing here and put it into practice. So there you are. Just a quick glance at when we do need to read a draft, okay, which is not very often, and a pointer in the direction of my Patreon page if you would like to explore color and weave in a little more depth. I'll see you next week with some news on my new online course that will be coming out next month, and I'll be able to show you the projects, and I'm very, very excited about that. So until next Wednesday, take care, and we'll see you soon.